Eternals. So overall, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it for the most part. We can say that I enjoyed it. Here's the thing. There was something at the very end that kind of like caught me off guard that I didn't like. But overall, but that's it. Like up until that point, I was hooked, man. I was invested. I was hooked. I was loving it, man. Man, I really like failed to see where like a lot of the critics or a lot of the like fault is being thrown to, because man, I don't know. I have a couple ideas and we'll get into it. By the way, this is spoiler free, so I am going to talk about it generically, and I'm not going to get into like any like details as far as like what actually happens in the movie. I'm going to try to be as generic as possible for anyone who hasn't seen it, which is most people because it just came out today, really, right? Officially. But I liked it. I enjoyed it. I think there are some things I can kind of understand, like I can kind of think of like where some people may have found fault with the movie, and I want to get into that, and I want to look into that some more, kind of like research that a bit, see what it's about exactly, and see if I agree with those points or not. I think I'm just gonna go out and say like what I think people may have had fault with, and I think it's the fact that it's a large cast, right? It's a large cast. There's a lot of like new characters that we're being introduced to for the very first time ever, right? That's the thing with this movie. It doesn't have the advantage, and this was a worry of mine even before the movie came out. The fact that it is such a large cast and it's brand new characters that we have yet to see in any aspect or any shape, way, or form in anywhere in the MCU, right? A lot of these other ensemble films, be it Avengers or take Captain America Civil War, right? They have the benefit of having these characters having been already introduced in previous films, right? Whether it be their own films or other heroes, whatever the case may be. But they have that advantage, right? This film, it's a big cast of brand new characters, heroes that we're supposed to get, that the movie is asking us to get emotionally invested in the span of within only this movie, right? And it's tough. It's a little tough. I will say it's a little tough. I have to say that I think the story resonated for me a bit more than I would say maybe the normal person, because of the situation that they were going through. Maybe not. Maybe I'm just reading too much into it. But I'll get into why in a bit. But I could definitely find some fault within there as far as like finding, the actual, establishing that bond where you want to connect with that characters. And then the thing is, with the movie is that by the third act, at the very end, you're expected to have this emotional attachment to the characters, so that then, the third act pays off, right? If not, like, if you don't care about the characters, like, nothing that happens at the end, you're not going to care about anything, and you're not going to care about the movie overall. So that's where I find where it could be difficult. Although for me, I feel like I did find like that I was able to, establish a good connection with the characters by the end of it. There were definitely like characters, some more than others, right? But there were definitely like good moves, as far as there were good moves made for establishing connections to some of the characters, and then for other characters, it's just kind of like you were just kind of expected to like kind of like ride the wave almost, right? Because it wasn't as planned out, or I guess it wasn't as well thought out, right? Lento, aburrido, casi toda la primera mitad. No me parece para nada. Antes, I'm gonna check my notes here. Actually, I would say that the opening was very entertaining. Yeah, the opening on its own, like the first, I guess like, I found it to be like a good way to like start off the movie and like to provide an introduction to the characters as far as like their powers, what they're capable of doing, what they're about. I liked it a lot the way they did that. I was taking notes, but It's these notes were written in a dark movie theater, so they're kind of all over the place, and I'm kind of wondering whether I'm actually even going to be able to decipher them. But let's see. Yeah, so one of the things that I wrote here was cool opening fight, right? So like the very first like encounter, like physical encounter that you have between the Eternals and the Deviants, I enjoyed it. I thought it was really cool, and it was a really cool way to introduce the characters. Going hand in hand with the fact that like there was just a lot of characters, there were a lot of storylines, right? There were a lot of like individual like threads that we were asked to follow, right? And the problem is that a couple of those threads kind of led to nothing in the end, and disappointingly so. I was kind of expecting like some of the stuff that was happening to kind of actually like have an effect at the end, but they didn't. They just kind of like it just kind of like didn't. I don't want to say it didn't matter, but it didn't have an effect, right? It didn't have as much an effect, I guess, as I thought it would by the end, right? Some of the storylines, although they may have been good in of themselves, right? You just kind of expect things to kind of lead somewhere, and the fact that they don't is kind of, I guess you can say, misleading, or at the worst, like confusing, right? Or at the best, confusing, right? So yeah, that kind of goes hand in hand with there being so many characters, right? So many characters, so many storylines. Cinematography wise, I will say, I actually wanted to think about this. It is good. You definitely see Chloe Zhao's like influence in like how, cinematography wise, like the the shots that are taken. There are some very nice shots. I will say, having come off of watching Dune like just a couple weeks ago though, man, Dune was so fucking nice. So Dune was so pretty as a movie, right? In terms of like shots. Yeah, man, it's crazy. It kind of like ruined the experience. I think if I had seen this movie, maybe not, but I want to say that if I had seen Eternals before having seen Dune, I would have been like much more appreciative of the cinematography here. But Dune, man, Dune spoils me, bro. Dune is such a fucking beautiful movie that just, and the thing about it is that it's beautiful and consistent. Like Dune is just beautiful, like all throughout, man. Like fucking like Villeneuve just like worked on that. He like, man, I'm sure he busted his ass to make sure that that movie was just gorgeous from start to finish. And for the most part, you can say that it was. This movie definitely, that's not to say this movie didn't have its moments. It definitely had its moments. There was one scene, man. There was one part that actually caught me the most, probably was like, it was a fight between Icarus and a Deviant. And it was very intense the way that it was shot. It was so intense, it actually gave me flashbacks to The Revenant, right? If anyone's aware of that film, Leo DiCaprio, I think Best Cinematography Oscars 2018, I want to say. Not exactly sure. But there was a moment where like there was a fight between them two, and it just reminded me, it just like instantly like, oh shit, this is like, man, this is really intense. So it definitely has its moments. It definitely has its merits. But besides that, there are some other like shots that are very nice between Gemma Chan, Cersei, and Rich Madden is his name, the actor, I believe, for Icarus. Their whole love story. There are some very like nice like shots with them two involved. I wanted to think about this for a second, and can I say that it's the best shot Marvel film out of all the MCU? So I wanted to actually run down like the list of the MCU to kind of see that. If I think about the MCU, what movies come to mind as far as like good cinematography? I want to say like Ragnarok, Thor Ragnarok, Avengers Endgame for cinematography. They do have good moments, don't they? Yeah, especially like some like the space stuff. Yeah, it does have its moments. I guess you can say it's one of the best. Yeah, Eternals is definitely up there as far as like one of the best shot MCU films for sure. It's definitely, you definitely get that with having, you know, Chloe Zhao behind the camera calling shots. So very much praise deserved in that regards, right? Let's get into performances, the actors, who I liked and who I didn't like. Um, so I think it's safe to say that, like, as far as like straying away from spoilers as much as possible, that, you know, Gemma Chan and Rich Madden's characters, Icarus and Cersei, you know, they are the love interest, right? And a lot of the movie does revolve around that love interest, right? I will say that I enjoyed, or I thought more highly of Rich Madden's performance over Gemma Chan. I feel like, I mean, and that may not actually be to the fault of the actor, right? I just feel like Rich Madden with Icarus had a lot more to work with, I want to say, than Gemma Chan. I feel like, man, thinking about it, I feel like there wasn't a whole lot for Gemma Chan to actually like, for her to actually like kind of, for us to get a like a good idea of her character, what her character's about, right? um yeah, whereas Rich Madden definitely had I feel like a lot more time to shine, right? um I'm just thinking about this, trying to avoid spoilers as much as possible. So they were both integral characters, right? um and again, so okay, so this has like, this is an effect of there being like so many characters. Of course, you can only spend like so much time invested. There can only be so much time invested in each character and for us to actually like care about them, right? By the end of the movie, you have to split up that time between all those characters. It's very, very tough to do. um and I think with Icarus, I felt more inclined, more connected with his character, because I personally felt more aligned with what his character was going through, right? It was it came down to something that, you know, something that based on my own life experiences, that I was very, you know, that I was able to sympathize with a lot more easier. And so yeah, I feel like that had an effect on it also. Just like my own personal life experiences allowed me to draw a better connection to that character. But I will say that I think that particular life experience is not common, I would say. I'd like to think, I hope so, right? And so I could see the case being made that, you know, people were just unable to like connect with the characters, right? Especially those two especially, right? Those two probably having the biggest impact because they are the most integral, right? The story does revolve around them more than anyone else, right? They're all involved in, you know, their own separate ways, but more than anyone of the Eternals, those two were the ones, you know, two that were, you know, the most important, quote unquote. So I think it was more important to establish a connection with those two as opposed to, you know, any of the other Eternals. And yeah, I could definitely see the case being made that that connection was hard to make. Regardless, I really like what he did with Icarus. I really like how he, you know, how he portrayed the character. Gemma Chan, I wish I got a little bit more from. Maybe, yeah. I'll just say that. I wish I got a little bit more from her. That's it. I think that's all I can say. Salma Hayek. Um, yeah, she was good. Yeah, she was good. Um, Angelina Jolie. She was awesome. She was cool. Yeah, she was really cool. I really liked Angelina Jolie. and what she was about. She played her character very well. She gave off the emotion of what that character was going through very well. Made I think a lot of people will walk away with her being like her character Thena being one of their favorites from the movie. I think it's safe to say, and I think it's just based on her portrayal of the character. She did a great job with that. Oh, Kumail Nanjiani as Kingo. Yo, my God. I mean, that's that. I think he's my favorite. He has to be, yeah, by far, yes, have to. From the first moment that we are introduced to him, to his character, to man, to the very end, just throughout, man, just consistent, just spot on, just man, yep. That's yeah, he was my favorite, easily, easily. Kingo is my favorite. So good, so charming, so he just man, he nailed it. He nailed it. He did a really good job with that character. Um, I enjoyed it. Yeah, just all praise, all the world of praise for him and for his performance because I loved it from the very first second to the last. Leah McHugh as Sprite, man. Uh, um, shit. I don't know how to feel. I feel like this one is maybe. I feel like this character um was affected more by writing more than actual performance. The way that the character was, what's the word? There were several things interesting about the character, and then, but I, and it, there was like an, so there was definitely a storyline with her in of itself, right? You had like a couple of storylines. You had a storyline with Thena. You had a storyline with Cersei and Icarus. You had a storyline with, and she Sprite very much had like her own storyline as well. Um, you had a storyline with the Deviants. We'll get into that later. But her in of herself, Sprite had she definitely had something to work with that wasn't followed through on, or at the very least wasn't capitalized on. Yeah, it wasn't capitalized. It wasn't. Yeah, didn't really end up how I would have wanted or expected. What she was about, right? I think that's all I can say, unfortunately. I feel it's not an issue with acting whatsoever. I feel it's like an issue with the writing. The writing. I feel like I feel like her character had a lot to work with, and in the end, it just didn't amount to anything. So, which is something that's actually happens pretty consistent with a couple of the things with this movie. So, next, Brian Tyree Henry as Fastos, or better known as Paper Boy, all about that Paper Boy. He was good. I liked him. Yeah, I mean, by the end of it, yeah, he had a lot of like character to him. He was one of the characters that was definitely like, I want to say, as opposed to like Cersei and Icarus being given like a lot of like time to kind of establish that character. I'm sorry, to establish the connection with those characters, because they are, arguably the most important for the overall story of the film. Fastos was one of the ones that was kind of left to the side. Fastos and like probably these last couple of few that I'm going to mention right now. Yeah, although interestingly enough, I want to say that even though he didn't get like as much time as some of the other Eternals, I want to say that by the end I did care like a good amount about him, and not only that, but I feel like he actually developed like a personality, even like within like the final like third of the film, right? Like the final like I guess you could say the final like giant action sequence at the very end, which is inevitable with any Marvel movie. Um, he was even giving us like little like hints of his personality within that moment there at the end, which I found to be like very like cool. It was very cool the way like how he was able to do that, the actor Tyree Henry. um, and that's all. I feel like that's all on the acting, right? He did a very good job with that, working with that. And by the end of it, yeah, even though he there wasn't so much that time dedicated to him, he turned out to be a very endearing character by the end. Lauren Ridloff as Makari. Um, she was freaking awesome, man. She was freaking awesome. And again, she falls in the category with Fastos as far as like Eternals that weren't given as much screen time. Um, I think it's safe to say that she was given the least out of all of them. Yeah. As far as like exposition about like her story or like what her character is about, I think we can definitely say that she was given the least to work with, and yet somehow she still she still pulled it off. She still pulled it off to make her a very endearing character, and that has a lot to do with not only the actor's performance, but the action sequences. Because although we didn't get a whole lot as far as like her backstory or what she was about, we definitely saw her a lot in the action sequences, and holy shit, she's freaking awesome. She is really like, yeah, she's definitely one that you're going to be looking out for as far as the action sequences and the fight sequences. Very, very cool. Oh man, it's so cool. I wish I can get into specifics as far as spoilers, but I mean, because her character and Icarus's characters translate very like easily to some other characters that we know in the DC universe, and as far as like what those characters go through, it's very cool to see that on the big screen, those characters going through that, because you kind of always imagine like, like what if, as far as like their DC counterparts, you always imagine what if like these guys, this actually happened with these guys. And we basically got a large screen movie adaptation of just that, right? It's not like the same exact characters name word by their name, but it's pretty damn close, right? So it's really cool. So she was really cool. Of course, the fact that she's deaf and she's like doing all her lines with sign language is really cool as well. I'm sure a lot of people are going to be pumped with that as far as representation goes for the deaf community or hard of hearing community. So that's really cool to have that in there. And the last Eternal, Barry Keoghan as Druig. I gotta say, the character in of itself was excuse me. The character in of itself was, hold up, I want to try something. Actually, no, we'll just leave it as is. Man, okay, you know what? I'm just gonna straight up and say it. This character probably had like was probably the most confusing for me. As far as like his ideals, like what he wanted to fight for, but ultimately what he did, like the actions that he took, right? They kind of contradicted themselves, right? So I was very just like overall confused with the character, and it was very hard for me to make like a determination as far as like whether he was good or not, right? I think it's safe to say that the performance, actually there's another Eternal, I just forgot, I saved them for last for a reason, but out of all the Eternals, I think it's safe to say that they all performed well except for one, which is the one that I left for last. But so his performance was good. I don't think there was any issues with that. there was just, yeah, it was just mainly the contradiction with like the characters like thoughts, beliefs, and ideals, right? What they were going for with that, like it just didn't make sense. It didn't add up to me. I can't talk about it in detail because it has to do with like his power, um and how he uses his powers in the film. So I'll just say that he was just confusing for me, unfortunately. So I never really like, I couldn't really get behind him, and luckily he wasn't one of like the standout Eternals, right? He wasn't like Circe or Icarus, so it wasn't too much of a problem, right? But nonetheless, like they're all like quote unquote main characters to some degree, right? So it does kind of put a damper on things. And the one I saved for last, unfortunately, the one that just didn't do it for me. Donnie, is that his name? Um, Ma Dong Seok, or Don Lee as Gilgamesh, just didn't do it for me. Yeah, I wanted to like look into this actor some more actually, because I'm not sure if he's, I don't even know if he's like, I know he was in Train for Busan. Wait, so I'm gonna look into him right now actually to see what other movies he's in, because it definitely seems to me that he's not accustomed to acting in English, I want to say, because I definitely felt like the yeah, the with like the translation, there was definitely something lost as far as like the impact of his acting. Sad enough. I'm sure he's a fine actor in whatever is like his natural language. Um, so I know he was in Train to Busan. I don't know if he's. Oh, he's Korean. Okay. Wow. Okay. I think it's safe to say, yeah. I think we're good. I think we're pretty much in the clear. Like I wasn't sure about it. But yeah, I think it's pretty safe to say that that is his first, if not one of the few English roles where he speaks English, and unfortunately, it shows. It does. You do lose a lot of the impact of his acting in like the awkwardness that he delivers his lines. Unfortunately, so I hate to say it, because I'm sure he's a fine actor. But yeah, it definitely it takes you out of it. It's the unfortunate thing, right? So yeah, sucks. But his powers are cool. Like his character's powers are cool, so that's good. I guess there were like a good few, like I guess you could say there were like maybe a couple like good comedic moments that came out of like his character when he was like introduced and such. So that's not bad. But that's probably as far as I could go as far as praise for him. All right, now let's get into the villain. Of course, we all know the deviants are like the main the poster villain, right? The ones that they showed up in the trailers. There is a um, there is a another threat, right? Not necessarily a villain. Just another outside of the deviants. There's like something else that the Eternals had to deal with, right? Safest way to put it. So, what it comes down to is that that other thing pretty much takes priority. That other thing is pretty much like the main thing that they're trying to stop. And unfortunately, the deviants just kind of take the back door. They just kind of get pushed to the side a bit. And I say unfortunately because there was actually something very interesting set up with them. For me, I think something very, very interesting that could have came from those characters. Sorry, from the deviants. They could have turned out to be a super interesting villain. They could have turned out to be a super interesting villain had it played out differently, right? Had they not been pushed to the side and just kind of, at the end of the day, they were pretty much just like the bad guys that the good guys had to fight against and nothing more, because there was like something leading up to that. There were like little tidbits of an actual like interesting villain coming out of it, but much like some other parts of the movie, it just amounted to nothing at the end, unfortunately. And I find it super unfortunate because I found the deviants to be so interesting. First and foremost, I love how they're designed. They're designed sick, and I know this is gonna sound like I'm just a weeb because they looked like Final Fantasy monsters, like, but they looked so freaking cool. Like, really, they just looked like they were Baumuts or like something straight out of like Final Fantasy. It was so cool. Another actual like fuck, I'm such a weeb. Another like anime slash Japan media parallel. They reminded me the way they reminded me of the Nomus from My Hero Academia. So there it was very I just found them to be very cool overall as far as like how they were designed, how they were portrayed, and the fights, right, that they got into with the Eternals. So I thought they were very cool looking. And then on top of that, right, to top of that, I was already on board with the Deviants. But then on top of that, there was actually like another layer of like actual complexity added to the Deviants. And I didn't expect it, right? I did not expect it like at all. So the fact that that was like shown to us was so freaking cool. Like when that like started to happen, when like the deviants, when the villain started to evolve in that fashion, and we started to like see that side of it, man, it was like so interesting. It just like things just it just you I thought that like things just went to a whole nother level as far as like possibilities, as far as the story, right, and what could happen at the end. And unfortunately, it just doesn't go any further from there. I feel like it had something very interesting to capitalize on there, and it just didn't do it. I found it super cool how they were. I'm gonna save the full comment for my spoiler talk. I'm gonna do that in a separate video, not on stream. But I found it super interesting. Right near the beginning of the movie, I want to say like within the first 15 minutes, so this isn't spoiling anything. Gemma Chan's character Cersei, she's like a teacher, like a teacher, and she's giving a class, and she talks about apex predators. That's all I'm gonna say. Pay attention. I found it very interesting what they did with that mention of apex predators at the very beginning, and how that went hand in hand with the design of the deviants. I found it was very interesting. It was very smart, and unfortunately, it didn't pan out, right? But for what they did do with it, it was interesting. So, yeah, I'll say that it's just you had the possibility of like of making like an interesting villain there, but then it was just pushed to the side overall. And what can I say about the end without spoiling? The thing that threw me off with the end that I wasn't fond of was just the fact that by the end of it all, there was a MacGuffin. There was a MacGuffin thrown in there. And that's all I'll say about it. I think that's all I can say about it. But that's kind of what threw me off about it, right? I just feel overall that the ending could have been a lot more impactful, right? Given the things that they were setting up in the movie with the different characters, with the different threads, right? I feel like the ending just lacked that impact, right? I felt like it could have. I was expecting the ending to make kind of like bring all the threads to like a center point and kind of like give a resolution to everything, but that was not the case at all. So that's disappointing. I think that's all I could say about them without spoiling, really. Um, the other character that I got a thread, Thena, I felt like as far as her like story thread goes, I feel like it was I feel like it was well done. I think like out of all the story threads the movie went through, I think probably that was like one of the better handled ones. It's a shame because her thread kind of ties in with the deviants and like how the deviants weren't how the deviants I feel weren't properly like taken advantage of, weren't capitalized on. They kind of cross paths there. So it's a shame. Um, but I feel like there could have been, you know, it. I don't think it's a matter of like, well, if they actually like made the deviant story thread like satisfying, then Thena wouldn't have gotten a satisfying conclusion. I don't think that's the case. I think there could have been something that could have worked for everything, for everyone, for all the different like story threads that they were trying to tell. But it just turned out that way in this particular um, cut of the film, right? Um, but for what it is, yeah, her again, a lot of it has to do with Angelina Jolie, the way she portrayed the character. Very well done, spot on. And her character and Thena and Gilgamesh develop a bond, and that is very primordial for her thread and for the result of her thread. And it was very by the end of it all, it was very poetic. It was very poetic and very well done. I will say definitely. As far as yeah, without a doubt, as far as like all the different like story threads that they were trying to pull out, Thena was good, which is why I feel like going back to what I said earlier, why I feel that her character is going to be like a fan favorite for a lot of people because of Angelina Jolie's portrayal and because of the fact of how her story thread actually got like a good, satisfying conclusion. Sucks. It just couldn't be the case for everyone. Um, I wrote down it was similar to Captain Marvel with the flashbacks. That was something interesting. It's interesting to me that like as far as like how the movie portrays certain events, right? We're working with something where we're showing events of the present, current day and time, and at certain parts throughout the film, it just kind of like flashes back to the past, right? And it kind of seems interesting to me that Captain Marvel was another one, you know. I don't know if there are any other MCU movies that did that, but Captain Marvel was the one that first like immediately popped into my mind as far as like MCU movies that did that. And it's interesting to me that Captain Marvel didn't get all that much love in the reviews. I'm gonna take a look at what it's rated at, but I remember it rated very regular, right? Nothing like out of this world. But Captain Marvel was always just like a okay movie. And so is Eternals, man. Eternals really doesn't like it's kind of mind-boggling to be honest, the fact that it's gotten rotten. Like, sure, it's not the best thing in the world. I don't think it's gonna be anybody's like favorite Marvel movie. But it definitely, I don't think it deserves like the rotten rating that it has at the moment at on Rotten Tomatoes. Yeah, it was just interesting to me how like both of these movies have taken like a similar route as far as like the telling of the story, in terms of switching from past to present throughout the film, and they're kind of getting similar reception, although I guess not because apparently Captain Marvel did a lot better than Eternals. So as far as the critics are concerned, I'll say this. I kind of just to like as a finisher to wrap it all up. The movie definitely has its merits. I definitely think it doesn't deserve like the criticism or as much as the criticism that it's been receiving right now. I definitely would say it's just like in the okay category, as opposed to being in the yuck category. I definitely say it's worth a watch. Go out there if you're a fan of Marvel, if you're a fan of the MCU, definitely go out there and watch it and make that determination on your own. I'm pretty sure that most people will enjoy it. It was a tall order. This movie took on a lot. It was a bit off a lot, and I've seen this on a lot of the reviews actually, that it probably bit off more than it can chew, right? And it does, that statement does ring very true, right? It was a lot, and not just in terms of the movie, like the story that the movie wanted to tell, but just just in terms of the material that it had to work with. It was just too much, right? Like all the characters, the Eternals, plus a villain. You have multiple story threads. Um, Not just the villains, but then you have like other threats and other things going on that take the heroes' interests and concerns and their time. And although the movie tried its best, right? I really feel like they really tried their best to do it. They really did some things. There were definitely some things in there as far as like the acting goes, the cinematography. I really feel like they tried their best to like tell like a coherent, captivating story. But at the end of the day, it was a lot. There were definitely moments that definitely like they did some things that I definitely didn't expect, right? And those things were definitely like so interesting, man. There were a lot of things that were just actually very kind of. I think the fact that I became so invested by the end of the film was the fact that there were a lot of things that happened in the movie, just were very unexpected to me. So it just kind of caught me off guard, and it just made me all that more interested in what was happening. And ultimately, for some of the story threads to not pay off at the very end is a bit disappointing, because as I mentioned, there was just a lot of things that were actually legitimately interesting, right? And a lot of things set up that really like could have paid off super well, but they didn't at the end. And that sucks. Um, but like I mentioned, still worth a watch, still enjoyable. Uh, Very nice to watch. I also want to say that I feel like the movie was hindered due to COVID. I feel like as far as like man, this movie like spans a lot of different across a lot of different places, right? Chloe Zhao definitely took advantage of that, but I can't help but think that if it weren't for the pandemic, that this movie would have expanded even farther reaches. I want to say, and this, yeah, it could be total assumption, but I want to say that if it weren't for the pandemic, that we could have gotten even more like places where the movie was filmed at, and even seen more uh, of these characters like interacting in different places and kind of supporting their overall story.